Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in amma ba'd. Reading from Sunan Dawood in the chapter of Jumu'ah, Kitab Jumu'ah. The author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, and the last thing that we read was where it was the minbar of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Says here, باب الصلاة يوم الجمعة قبل الزوال. حدثنا محمد بن عيسى قال حدثنا حسان بن إبراهيم عن ليث عن مجاهد عن أبي الخليل عن أبي قتادة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه كره الصلاة نصف النهار إلا يوم الجمعة وقال إن جهنم تسجر إلا يوم الجمعة. قال أبو داود وهو مرسل. مجاهد أكبر من أبي الخليل وأبو الخليل لم يسمع من أبي قتادة. So the chapter states, prayer on the day of Jumu'ah before the time of Salatul Dhuhr. Literal translation, قبل الزوال. Obviously we know the sun rises from the east and it begins its long descent or its descent to the middle of the sky, for simple terms. It rises, ascends, and then when it reaches the middle of the sky, it stays put for a brief period of time. Then the sun begins its slow and gradual descent to the west. Once the sun sits still, and then it starts moving again towards the west, that is called az-zawal in Arabic. So once the sun reaches its zenith or its zenith, then it starts to move down. It's now time for Salatul Dhuhr. Saturday, or Yawm al-Sabt, more correctly, Yawm al-Ahad, Yawm al-Ithnain, Yawm al-Arbi'ah, Yawm al-Khamis, which we would say Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, etc. You normally are not allowed to pray during that time. You can't pray during that time. It's not Dhuhr time yet, and you are prohibited from making additional prayers that don't have a specific reason, according to some ulama, and some ulama say you can't make any additional prayers. So that would include anything. That would include nafila salah, duha, coming in the masjid, 2 rak'ah after wudu, making salat tawbah, making salat istikhara, praying any prayer which is not fard, you cannot pray at that time. And other schools, some ulama, they say that you can make the dhawatul asbab, voluntary prayers that have specific reasons. Al-muhim, what's agreed upon is that it isn't a time for additional prayers, with exceptions to Jumu'ah. So this chapter heading is saying is that on the day of Jumu'ah, if a Muslim comes to the masjid at 11 a.m., 10 a.m., 12 p.m., 10:30 a.m., he or she is allowed to do what? Pray extra prayers. Even though you normally wouldn't be praying at certain times. After Fajr until the sun rises, and between the Fajr and the Dhuhr time when the sun is at its and it's not descending yet. Except for the day of Jumu'ah. And obviously, there are other issues that pertain to this, which are important for every single Muslim. And that is, does Salatul Jumu'ah have a Sunnah Qabliyah? Are there prayers that are standard Sunnah prayers before Jumu'ah? Or are you allowed and you're commanded to come to the masjid and pray as much as you want until the Imam comes in? Salatul Dhuhr has a standard Sunnah before it. Fajr has a standard Sunnah what? Before it. 2. Maghrib has a standard Sunnah afterwards. 2. But does Jumu'ah have a standard Sunnah? A person says, I want to make my Sunnahs for Jumu'ah. Or do you come in the masjid before the Imam speaks and make 2 rak'ah, 4 rak'ah, 6 rak'ah, 8 rak'ah, 10? There's a difference between this and between that. What's important is, this chapter heading says, prayer before the Dhuhr time. Then Imam Abu Dawood, rahimahullah ta'ala, and I can't give you the number here, whereas this version doesn't have numbers in it, on al-Ma'bud. And the version that we normally read from, with the modern day print, has the numbers in it. Al-Muhim, you can find it easily. Imam Abu Dawood rahimahullah ta'ala, he quotes his chain of narration that goes back to Abu Qatada radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam disliked prayer nisfan nahari, in the midday, except for the day of Jumu'ah. And he said that hell is kindled and brought to a horrible blaze at that time, except for the day of Jumu'ah. Meaning that's the reason why. The Muslim should not pray at that time. Just like a Muslim should not pray when the sun is setting, the Muslim should not pray the voluntary prayers when the sun is rising, because of those who worship Satan, and to avoid imitating them. So he says that hell is tusjar, is brought to a horrible blaze at that time, except for the day of Jumu'ah. Imam Abu Dawood rahimahullah ta'ala, he comments on this hadith by saying, "Wuhu mursal." And this hadith, its chain of narration is missing a link. It is not continuous, rather it is mursal. All right? And he says, speaking on its narrators, he says that Mujahid akbaru min Abi al-Khalil wa Abu al-Khalil lam yasma' min Abi Qatada, is that there's a narrator who did not hear from one of his supposed teachers. I'm not going to get into the technicalities of ilm al-hadith right now. This is a faida for some brothers, some sisters may be watching who are more interested in learning about hadith sciences. What's important is that's what the hadith states. Now, it states here in the commentary, باب الصلاة من السنن والنوافل تجوز يوم الجمعة وقت استواء الشمس قبل الزوال ولا يجوز ذلك في غير يوم الجمعة إن جهنم تسجر بصيغة المجهول من باب نصر أي توقد. قال الخطابي قوله تسجر جهنم وبين قرني الشيطان وأمثالها من الألفاظ الشرعية التي أكثرها ينفرد الشارع بمعانيها ويجب علينا التصديق بها والوقوف عند الإقرار بصحتها والعمل بموجبها كذا في النهاية إلا يوم الجمعة فإنها تشجر فتجوز الصلاة يوم الجمعة وقت استواء الشمس قبل الزوال وهو مرسل. قال المنذري وأبو الخليل صالح ابن أبي مريم ضبعي بصري ثقة احتج به البخاري ومسلم انتهى. وأخرج البيهقي في المعرفة من طريق سعيد بن أبي سعيد عن أبي هريرة أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إلى آخره. He says what's meant by this chapter heading is that recommended prayers which are not obligatory, they are allowed to be performed on the day of Jumu'ah, even though, as I just explained, you normally will be prohibited from doing so. You would not be allowed to do so Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You're not allowed to pray at that time, just like there are other times in which you are not allowed to pray. But what's important is this is one of the rulings of Jumu'ah, which every Muslim, no matter how much or how little he or she knows, should have a basic grasp of. And obviously those who have more knowledge, those who are students of knowledge, those who are learned, they need to have much more knowledge of this to teach other people, and let the sunnah be learnt properly and be taught properly, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And of course, any tulabul ilm out there watching, yani own al-ma'bud, la shak, is from the min aham kutub fiqh al-hadith التي يعني يحرص على اقتنائها ومطالعتها ويعني وكثرة النظر فيها. It's a book that is something that you need to always be in as a student of knowledge and a student of hadith. Own al-ma'bud. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Sallallahu sallam wa barak ala abdihi wa rasulihi nabina wa imamina Muhammad. Are there any questions?
The time of Jumu'ah, it said you should not be talking in the time of Jumu'ah. When you hear the Prophet's name, you could mention it.
Say sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to yourself.
Say sallallahu.
Yeah, don't make it loud. Yes.
Okay.
Wallahu alam.
Next question is there's any? I heard someone quoting this hadith here. They said the Prophet ﷺ never stretched his foot out like this here and sit